Hi everyone, I'm Alyssa. Welcome to this video, and today I want to share with you some thoughts on Lauren Groff's new book, Matrix. This is somewhat of a review, but it's also a lot of other ramblings as well. I had a lot of thoughts, and I really enjoyed this book. It was the first of Lauren Groff's books that I ever read, and I have a lot to say about it. If this book was also on your radar, then you probably already know what it's about. This takes place in southern England and follows the character of Marie, who is loosely based on the real historical figure of Marie de France, who was a poet writing in the 12th and 13th century. Marie becomes the abbess of this abbey, and we follow her along that journey. While she is based on a historical figure, Lauren Groff's Marie is very much a product of fiction. Marie does not fit into her society very well. She's described as being too tall and unattractive. She has far too much ambition for a woman. Because of her lack of marital potential, she's assigned to be a prioress at an abbey, which is like the second in command. When she arrives, this abbey is in very poor shape, but Marie's ambition really takes root, and she creates the abbey into this very self-sufficient and self-governing isolated haven of women. This novel is female. It is female-centric, it is the female gaze, it is an exploration of the female experience in the gaping absence left of historical neglect. Matrix is Latin for mother or womb, and there are no male characters in the entire novel. This abbey becomes a sort of city of women who flourish, I believe it is suggested, because of their gendered independence and because of their ability to secretly remove themselves from certain social hierarchies that would otherwise repress women during this period. Even as fiction, this novel is women's history. It is a reclaiming of the female experience and perspective. And Groff uses fiction in this way to illuminate and then fictionally revitalize the real absences that exist in our historical accounts due to erasure of the female experience. Lauren Groff uses Marie de France as inspiration in ways that I found really sophisticated, and having done a little bit more research on my own, I learned that in the poems of Marie de France, there is a theme of her characters experiencing adventure while never seeking it out. Adventure comes to them. Knowing this, I think, illuminates some of the choices that Lauren Groff makes in Matrix, because I wouldn't have characterized this as adventure, but there is a theme or a pattern of certain characters acting within confined realms of circumstances. The most obvious for this confined female cast is gender. Marie's savvy leadership, her raw ambition, her innovative thought is confined to the female-only world of the Abbey. Had she been a man possessing all these same skills and talents, she likely would have had access to other forms of social hierarchy that were not available to her just because she was a woman. A catalyst for much of the plot is Marie creating various forms of fortification against the vulnerabilities of her gender and protection of her Abbey sisters. In addition to her gender, Marie's fate is also dictated by the illegitimacy of her birth, the undesirability of her height and appearance, and her sexuality. She is queer at a time where, of course, that was not socially accepted. The last point is not widely known, I suppose, but these characteristics do repetitively relegate Marie into increasing degrees of limited social agency within her cultural and historical context. It seems to me that the theme in Marie de France's poems of her characters encountering rather than seeking out adventure could be influenced by the limited social agency of the female medieval experience in ways that Lauren Groff then illustrates in some of her characters in Matrix. In an interview, Lauren Groff discusses this book capturing the emotion of feeling caged and weighed down emotionally during the Trump era, and I think that that feeling of confinement really comes through. There is a kind of female empowerment in this novel that emerges out of the context of confinement to courtly love and church hierarchy, and despite, if not because of that, tapping into potential and betterment within confinement. Of course, Marie and Groff's women seem intriguingly empowered and agents of themselves within the historical context of this novel, but I will return to that point in a moment. A second notable characteristic that I learned about Marie de France's work was her tendency to interweave the folk and the supernatural into everyday settings, this alternating of the real and the supernatural. And this immediately reminded me of Marie's visions. In Matrix, Marie is assigned to the Abbey, and while she does rise to the position of abbess, it's clear that she acquires this because of her qualities of leadership and not because of her piety. However, on a few occasions, Marie has visions of projects that the Abbey should undertake for purposes of self-sufficiency and protection. Within a religious context, these visions, of course, already possess their supernatural justification. However, beyond the visions themselves, the actions that these visions inspire are, if not supernatural, they're very out of the ordinary, somewhat fantastical, are very daring for women in this context to attempt. They build towards a sort of female sanctuary. And they feel like more of an appeal to modern feminist sensibilities rather than being appropriate within their historical context. Lauren Groff did say in an interview that she wanted there to be a sort of reverberation between this moment in history and the present, and using this fictional historical event to speak to the contemporary moment. While I'm normally a stickler for anything remotely anachronistic, this feminist conversation with the past to the present never felt out of place or like in violation of suspense. And I think this speaks to the quality of craft and research and execution on the part of Lauren Groff, who apparently, like Marie de France, seamlessly wove elements of the contextually near fantastical within a well-grounded historical text. Even though Marie possesses, at least arguably anachronistic, ideologies far too progressive for her historical context, the deliberation and calculation in Groff's execution makes it clear that this is not a failure of historical writing, this is a success of fiction. Which leads me to why I think that this novel is a phenomenal example of historical fiction done right. All we really know about Marie is her connection to her writing. There's much speculation of who she might be, but Marie might be a pen name, and all of that might be completely wrong. There is a lot of information we have about the Middle Ages, but there's also an absence of a lot of detail, especially, and this is important, when it comes to women. The neglect and sometimes erasure of the female experience means that even inside the context of a lot of the historical knowledge we do have, that is usually from and relating to the male experience and the male perspective. And this absence of knowledge of so much of women's history is ripe with potential for fiction. I've actually noticed that far beyond Matrix, this is a pattern that is increasingly prevalent in historical fiction, especially literary historical fiction. The term female gaze is not exactly the right term to use here, but I want to use it anyway to emphasize that this is not a revisiting of women in history. This is a reclaiming of the female experience and female perspective, and that's different, and that's really cool. In an interview, Lauren Groff discusses the objective of filling in the absences and presenting an alternative world by reordering the perspective or presentation of characters outside of the male-centric perspective. And the world that Marie creates within her abbey is definitively a matriarchy. It is explicitly a non-male-centric world. Just listen to this. When she cannot sleep, Marie likes to go down to the scriptorium and change the Latin of the missals and the psalters into feminine, for why not when it is meant to be heard and spoken only by women? She laughs to herself as she does this. Slashing women into the text feels wicked. It is fun. This feels like a speculation of an alternative history that was preset or default for the female experience rather than the male. I think this sentiment creates a very interesting conversation with modern feminism, as nothing that Marie ever does is antagonistic towards men. The extent of her female empowerment is simply creating a physical space that removes herself and her sisters away from male aggression. And yet this alone is seen as radically rebellious. The novel states that what Marie is doing is seen as aggressive. Women act counter to all the laws of submission when they remove themselves from availability. This is what inflames Marie's enemies. But despite the female empowerment, despite having no male characters, despite the matriarchal society, this is still a novel set within the world of men. Within her essay, The Master's Tools Will Never Dismantle the Master's House, Audre Lorde asks, what does it mean when the tools of a racist patriarchy are used to examine the fruits of the same patriarchy? It means that only the most narrow perimeters of change are possible and allowable. Groff explores female empowerment within a world where none of her characters have a real path to manifestation. No matter the level of Marie's ambition or her success to protect herself and her Abbey sisters, she can never be free of the cage. Groff is both presenting an antithesis, an alternative history that reclaims the female experience in the past while engaging in a complex conversation with the future of feminism. Frankly, I could carry on, but I won't. This was a superbly fascinating novel, and I enjoyed it immensely. Prospective readers should probably know that this is a slow burn. It is a slow read of a novel, but the writing is gorgeous, it is sensual, and it is immersive. And if you give it the space and the pace that it needs, it is deliciously enjoyable. I have obviously focused on other things on the writing style in this review, but I just want to make sure it is clearly stated and well understood that Lauren Groff is phenomenal at her craft, and the writing in this book is very high quality. I'm gonna end this video here, but if you have read this book, I would love to hear your thoughts on it. Please go down to the comment section and share. If you have not read this book yet, are you planning to? Are you intrigued? And if you happen to be familiar with the writing of Lauren Groff, her other novels, I would love for you to recommend for me where I should go next, because I was very satisfied with this and I am interested in reading more of her work. Thank you so much for watching this video, and I'll see you guys in another one. Bye.